Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second session of the Africa INDABA. We are very excited to have three panelists who are very informed in this line of the session. We are going to have, for those who would like to have interpretation, please click on the globe at the bottom for the French interpretations. Our first speaker will be Dr. Florence Etta, followed by Dr. Vincent Kanyamuna and Dr. Sonal Zaveri. Thank you so much. And we welcome you, everyone. And I can see this Andrea from Brazil. Welcome. Thank you so much. Dr. Etta, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lebo, for the warm introductions, and welcome everybody to this clear Anglophone Africa INDABA. I will just trying to share my screen here. The session is basically talking about, can you see my screen okay?
Not as yet, Doc.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
it's,
just
thank
give
you.
a moment. All right. Okay. Fabulous. You can see it okay now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. So basically, this session is about promoting gender mainstreaming in M&E policies in Africa, as you can see on the title of the slide there. And my presentation is titled A Long and Contoured Journey Towards Equity and Social Justice Through Transforming Evaluation. I come into this space with great gratitude and thanks to Clear Anglophone Africa, to the director Candice and all of the staff who've been very, very supportive. And in particular, for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts in this very, very critical area of work. I thank other panelists who we haven't met physically, but I know Sonal very well. We've worked together in many, many spaces. And I thank Dr. Vincent for joining us and making the trial of this presentation. The outline of the presentation, you can see there. I have 4 different sections with the beginning, background, and then just one or two slides to interrogate ourselves about exactly the history and the current situation of gender mainstreaming. And then I'll share highlights of a study that we used, an innovative tool for looking at monitoring and evaluation policy and system in one country, one African country, Kenya. And finally, we ask ourselves, how can we make this journey faster, more effective, more efficient? Those are the 4 basic points, touch points for this presentation. In terms of background, excuse me, I'm just recovering from a nasty cold. The study was commissioned, the initial study was commissioned by Twendem Bailey in 2016. And the idea was to conduct diagnostic studies in 3 African countries, Uganda, South Africa, and Benin. And following that in 2019, a follow-up study of Kenya, and 20 added other countries as well, but I was the one that anchored the Kenya study with a small group of, not so small group of researchers. And so the presentation is based on the 2019 study, which itself is based on some of the work and the tool that started out with the 2016 study. And just a refresher for us, I wanted to find out or remind ourselves how familiar we are. Just hold on, looks like I went. Yeah, it's okay. I think this is the 3rd slide. How familiar we are with gender mainstreaming. So we have 3 poll questions here The question is at the top, and the response options are follow through. There we have the poll. May I request you to very kindly respond to all 3 questions on the poll, and then we would look at what the responses show. Yes, and even I will, I'm requesting even the panelists to respond if they can. Looks like we can't. Well, maybe I am the only one that cannot. So we would look at those 3 questions in sequence when we, the poll is closed. The idea is, mainstreaming, as it were, was a very grand and noble idea. And it was basically, we're waiting for the poll responses, so I'm just kind of filling in the time, and unless you want some quiet to respond to the questions.
We can carry on, Doc. As soon as Talita has them up, she
Okay.
will just now. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Lebo. So mainstreaming at the time that it was adopted as a global strategy seemed like a great idea. It was absolutely fabulous to think that we were taking the responsibility for gender mainstreaming and responding to gender equality and equity out of the small spaces that it had inhabited into, as it were, the public square. We were saying it was now supposed to be at all levels, all stages, all programs, policies, whether it is a design, whether it is implementation, whether it is monitoring, that it had to be gender, and the attention to gender equality and equity had to be integrated in all of these stages, sectors, levels. So it seemed like a grand idea. It was, at the time, it was novel, it was welcomed, it was absolutely ecstatic that gender was going to receive the attention and the commitment that it desired in relation to equity and equality. And that was then. But here we are today. And I'm not sure how many of us remember. That's a wonderful, great idea. So how familiar are you with gender mainstreaming? We have 24% saying very familiar, 64% saying slightly familiar, and 13% saying not familiar, as you can see. And that's a very interesting, very U-shaped curve. So the slight familiarity is heartwarming, but the not familiar in terms of 13% is also dipping of my heart. And then question 2 says, when was it adopted as a global strategy? And here we have over 60%, over 2/3 having the wrong answer. The correct answer is 1975 at the Beijing conference. Sorry, just hold on. Let's go down a bit. Let's go down a bit. In the, can we slide down? Can we slide down in that poll report,
Mind
please?
sliding down on the poll for the results, please, so Dr. Etta can see them.
Yes, please. Sorry.
Can you see it now?
No, we have to slide down the poll result.
Okay, it's really down on my end. Maybe if you don't mind, I can read it out for you.
Okay, let me. Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
so the third question.
I have done it now. I just expanded it. Yeah. So what I see there is almost 50% say 2005, and none of those years are correct. 1975 was the year that the UN declared Decade of Women. 1985 was the 4th World Conference on Women that took place in Nairobi and declared it was the beginning of the strategy, but the strategy itself was adopted in 1995 during the Beijing, the 5th World Conference on Women. So anybody that responded to any of these years has it wrong. And the whole idea here is to remind ourselves that this is a critical bit of information, maybe historical, maybe nonsensical, but we need to remind ourselves and hark back to the beginnings of this. And in our opinion, how well has it done? 71% say it has done moderately well. Now, as a researcher, I would posit that with the responses to the last two questions, if we are not very familiar with it, if we are not aware of the year it was launched as a global strategy, then how well is our assessment of how well it has done. So I had talked about this in relation to how well it is doing. The results of gender mainstreaming are not very heartwarming, is what we're saying. And the UN Women, in June this year, actually put out a report that says the world is not on track. And in a recent, very, very recent this month, an additional note to say that this is true. We are not on track to achieve the gender equality goals of the SDGs. SDG number 5, that is particularly related to gender equality, and most of the other indicators that are gender related in all of the other goals. What this suggests is that we need bold commitment and strong policy action. And that's why I'm particularly happy that we're having this conversation here today. And so in this section, I want to share with you the results of the study that was conducted in 2019 in Kenya. And the study was basically trying to look at the gender responsiveness of the National Integrated Monitoring and Evaluation System of Kenya. At the time, Kenya did not have a nationally accepted and what we call, it's still not legislated, evaluation policy, but they do have. This year, Kenya actually adopted a national policy on evaluation. So kudos to Kenya, my adopted country. And the custodian of the system is the Evaluation Directorate, which is housed in National Treasury and Planning Ministry. And the main tool for the study was a matrix that was developed in 2016. And the matrix basically had items to respond to the policies and the system. The structure of that matrix, basically two different, what we call them matrices. One was for the national evaluation policy, another one was for the national evaluation system. And that is just an idea of what it was like. We are not going to go into all of that, but just to tell you that this is what happened: 57 items, 5 analytical categories. And these are the analytical categories. So we looked at the national policy in relation to gender equality. We looked at the policy documents of all of the country. So the constitution, the national strategy, any national policy that had anything to do in relation to how gender equality is related, including conventions, identifying conventions that were signed. So all of those items. Participation was basically who was involved in this policy making in relation to evaluation conduct. And what we had done for this analytical framework was to identify, what we did was identify that there are 3 levels in the national policy ecosystem, and that to be able to understand how to deal with this and to be able to situate ourselves in terms of actions, what is it that we need to understand? That national evaluation policy is located within a national evaluation ecosystem that has 3 levels: the national or macro level, the meso or institutional level, and the micro or evaluation project level. And the whole idea here is that we should target actions and understand how we interact and coordinate and collaborate in these spaces.
Doc, sorry to disturb you.
Yeah.
Slides are showing the presenter's view. Do you mind making sure that they are shifted from that view?
Okay.
Here.
So where would I display settings? Okay. So a presenter view slideshow. Sorry, is that better? Is that better?
Sorry, it's great. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. So this slide is just showing you basically the levels, what we mean when we talk about those levels, and what are the items in the questions that we're asking. So we're saying we need to look at these three levels where we're looking at the national evaluation ecosystem. The top level is really like the policy level. The meso level is really like the institutional level, which is the system. And the micro level is the project level where we're actually targeting the evaluation of a project, a policy, or a plan. So that is the point we're saying the ecosystem involves all of this, and that is one of the useful things. So basically, what did we find? At the policy level, what we found was that for Kenya, national policy documents and strategies, and even the environment demonstrate commitment to rights, gender equality, and social equity. What do we mean? The constitution of the country is particularly explicit about the rights of women and other underserved groups. It is particularly clear about the rights of people, everybody, geographically, differently abled people, and all of that. Institutions have been created to take care of this. Policies are in place. Commissions and committees are in place. Second finding is that the ministries, development agencies, ministries and development agencies, ministries, departments and agencies, that is a place where monitoring is most accentuated. And there are lots of frameworks, procedures, and processes. And the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, the directorate, has lots and lots of documentation in this regard. So we are not, what is happening, there's a lot of monitoring happening, but not a lot of evaluation. And this is not restricted to Kenya. What we found is that there's weak coordination and leadership in respect of gender responsive M&E government-wide. There is a public service ministry that also has the remit for gender responsiveness, but it's not strong enough to coordinate the action. And it's in terms of budgeting, it's not enough to deal with other ministries and bring them all to a location of common understanding and common use and push. Vertical policy integration. When I mean vertical, I mean from the national policy, the constitution, to ministries, departments, and agencies, if they do have policies in relation to M&E, and right up to the project level, that vertical integration is missing. And finally, the top three challenges we found is patriarchy, inadequate funding, and weak technical capacity. Conclusion is, first and foremost, what are the contributions from this study? Just the understanding that we can look at evaluation from a diagnostic perspective, meaning what is missing, what is the sickness, as it were, borrowing an idea from health. Second thing is the innovative methodology of the diagnostic matrix itself. And finally, the analytical framework to say, hey, when we're looking at national policies, let us also look at the entire evaluation ecosystem such that we can integrate them and bring them all together. And the lesson is that mainstreaming gender in evaluation is not easy. It is complex, it's operating at all these kinds of levels, and therefore it is hard work. And perhaps that explains why we haven't done very well with it. And that second lesson is that there are many contours to this work. There are many points of entry, many routes, and multiple actors are absolutely required, which is a good point to say. So how do we accelerate this work? We need to amplify commitment for the long haul, for all the levels, for all the actors, to bring understanding and illumination to each of these spaces so we can understand what is happening in all of them. But we don't all have to work in all the spaces all of the time. We need to increase funding and diversify its sources. We also need to clarify and deploy analytical tools to help us get at a higher level of illumination. Sometimes when we're too much down at the foothills in the grasses, we don't see the top of the trees, especially the big ones. We need to do this, we need to support research and documentation. And finally, we need to join hands with many different people. So clear Anglophone Africa can work with ministries, can work with VOPEs, can work with individuals as it is currently. And my dear ladies and gentlemen, I may have forgotten quite a bit, but I thank you for your attention, and I may have raced in terms of my speed. I am sorry for that. I was given 12 minutes to work with, and I think I've gone over that by 4 or 5. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Etta. It was very informative and quite concerning to learn that we are so far behind from reaching the SDG 5 as well as SDG 10. So our next speaker is Dr. Vincent. Participants, could you please share your views and comments and questions in the chat? And I'm giving over now to Dr. Vincent. Thank you so much, sir. Here you go.
Thank you so very much. I just need to confirm if you are able to see my slides already.
Yes, I am. They just need to be in slide mode now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I just want to say that I'm also humbled that CREA AA has been able to consider me to share my views on this very important event of the Africa Evaluation INDABA. So my name's Vincent Kanyamuna. Greetings from here, from Lusaka, Zambia. So my topic really is to look at promoting gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation policies in Africa. So
I'm not too sure if we've lost you.
You have lost me? So let me, are you still able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Please, you can always communicate in case network becomes, yeah, so I'm going to look at promoting gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation policies in Africa. And I wanted to just make a point here that Dr. Etta has done justice in terms of defining the concept of gender mainstreaming. She has actually touched quite a number of aspects, including the historical perspective of gender mainstreaming. So in terms of my outline, I'll just basically just hover on the concept of gender mainstreaming, of course, taking advantage that something has been already laid down. But I'll move on to mainstreaming gender in monitoring and evaluation, or for short M&E, basically to look at some opportunities and challenges. And then we'll be able to just look at gender mainstreaming, just a look at Africa at a glance in terms of efforts to mainstream gender in monitoring and evaluation. And then we'll be able to conclude, and if I'll just leave ourselves with questions in terms of if we, the audience will have any suggestions to improve gender mainstreaming. I would like to say that in every development intervention, understanding the gender dimensions of activities, of outputs and outcomes is key for tracking progress, reporting on results, and ensuring that there's transparency. We know that at the back of everything that we do is a development discourse. So as the world economy transitions, towards adopting and sustaining the practice of results-based management approach, there are pertinent questions, that arise. And since results-based management concerns the notions of M&E in terms of operationalizing it, you find that us as practitioners of both results-based management and monitoring and evaluation, we vest ourselves well in understanding these notions. But of interest lately really has been the desire to explain the meaning and value of gender in monitoring and evaluation. While monitoring and evaluation results-based management notions have been there for some time now, but the issue of bringing in gender is really not as odd as we may want to think. So quite a lot of professionals really have come to appreciate what M&E generally is, but there remains this gap or eminent lacuna in terms of articulating the notion of gender, M&E, or simply gender in monitoring and evaluation. And this is what we want to really look at in the next few minutes or so. I wanted to just underscore a point, as my colleague, Dr. Etta, already put it, that gender mainstreaming is a strategy really for making the concerns and experiences of women as well as of men, an integral part of the design, of the implementation, of the monitoring and evaluation of policies and programs in all political, economic, and societal spheres. We do this so that women and men benefit equally, and inequality is not perpetuated. So I think that's really the underlying. So even when we want to actually strengthen, if you want to strengthen gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation activities or frameworks, we have at the back of our minds man and woman being able to access the development opportunities in an equal manner. I think that's really very important to keep at the back of our minds. And we know from history that women for a long time have been sidelined in many other aspects of development processes. And gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation really tries to challenge us to be deliberate in what we do. So I want to say that it is very important to remember that gender mainstreaming is actually not an end. We should keep that in mind, but rather a means to achieve gender equality. So when we achieve gender, or when we pursue gender mainstreaming, it doesn't mean that that's an end, but rather it's just a means for us to be able to now get to where we need to get. So I want us to move on to mainstreaming gender in M&E. I think one of the difficult things to come to terms is, yes, we may agree that mainstreaming gender is very important on one hand, but really, how do we mainstream gender in monitoring and evaluation? How do we operationalize the mainstreaming of gender in M&E? I think that's where the question is maybe not clear, or rather the how is not clear. So here, I just want to share that in terms of how we mainstream gender in M&E, we need to look for certain aspects of the processes of monitoring and also processes of evaluation, where we can have an opportunity for us to actually apply gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation. So one of these will be sex disaggregated data. I think this is really emphasized in project program management, that always we need to ensure that we try to disaggregate data. We create our indicators and disaggregate data according to gender, that it's even better to do. Another aspect is really gender analysis. There are quite a number of reports which are generated by governments, also non-government organizations, even us in the academia. In my case, you find that we write quite a number of research reports or evaluation reports, but the question is, do those reports really undertake what we can call gender analysis? So when we go into these reports, are we able to see the different experiences of men and women in the development discourse? So you find that many reports will fail the test of gender analysis. They may just lump analysis of different groupings without really bringing out these issues. So another aspect is where you want to understand the culture and gender power dynamics. When we are implementing our different interventions in society, you would find that you do not understand the cultural and gender power dynamics. As a result, we know that, for example, in Africa here, it is quite known that due to our traditional and cultural dynamics, there's a way we interact. And if you do not understand, you stand a chance that you'll not be able to get the best out of the men and women. So both women and men really must be consulted. So one other opportunity to ensure that our frameworks, our M&E frameworks are really gender sensitive. We need to ensure that the consultations in our development processes are quite inclusive and deliberately so. And women as well as men should also be able to be involved in the design of programs. So we know that the project cycle has got those many stages. And this point really points to the fact that the issue of mainstreaming gender in M&E processes should start and should be embedded in the project life cycle itself. And that program and project level objectives and indicators should also reflect the anticipated changes and benefits for both men and women. I want to get to something that is interesting, but let me end by saying that, on this particular front, let me just end by saying that when we are looking at mainstreaming gender in M&E, we need to have two major aspects. I think my colleague, Dr. Etta, mentioned of evaluation experiences. And I want to say here that in evaluations and in monitoring processes, we use indicators to know what is performing well and what is not performing well. So in that regard, you find that gender sensitive indicators are or should be actually a must-have. You will find that we'll be able to get there as much as we can. Then the other aspect I wanted to say is that gender evaluation is another aspect that we can actually embed gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation processes. And there are quite a number of suggestions out there where we can take advantage of evaluation being a table or a platform where we can actually practice gender mainstreaming. So for example, when you are developing terms of reference for evaluation, you make sure that you include an assessment of how gender inequality will be addressed. Also, you'll be able to use a combination of male and female evaluators where possible. You can also ensure that at least one evaluator has a gender expertise or experience. Those are deliberate ways to really ensure that M&E is able to be responsive in terms of gender. Also, you can ensure that locations and timing for discussions with women and men, take into account cultural issues, such as busy times, how women sometimes will be busy doing household related tasks and that's the time we want to go and convene an evaluation exercise. You can also hold separate male and female focus group discussions as a way of trying to excite feedback from the two groupings. You can also ensure that the key findings are fed back to the target groups, not holistically, but specifically, you know. Another aspect is where, when planning for an evaluation, practitioners should also select venues using a gender lens. And also timing of these evaluations should be planned in such a way that all activities, meetings, and discussions are actually sensitive to the needs of both men and women. Yeah, so I want to think that this is quite important to just reflect through in terms of what does it really mean to mainstream gender in M1E. But I want to share something here that when we look at gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation, and if we take Africa as a glance, as I really conclude, you would notice that at the African level, we have the African vision of the Africa we want. This is Agenda 2063. And we have no choice. I think we need to make that vision as much as possible gender responsive. And I know efforts are there by the African Union itself and member states, but I suggest that it's very important that that's a platform which brings us together as Africans. In the same vein, every country implements some form of a national development plan. These national development plans also, there can be, you know, sector plans. So for us to be able to attain these, we need to make sure that these national frameworks must reflect continental aspirations of mainstreaming gender. And once we have, like currently, we are doing some work to check whether the Zambian National Development Plan, how it is aligned to other continental and global agendas. And one of the issues that has ensued in the meeting is really, has the National Development Plan, you know, mainstream gender, and has the National Development Plan's results framework also reflecting the gender lens. And it's a good discussion to note that gaps are there and efforts also are there in terms of trying to make these things work. Also, we can thrive towards a unified and integrated evaluations agenda at the African level. You know, Africa requires an evaluations powerhouse, some form of an institution that seeks to promote skills, services, and experiences in evaluation, also centered on gender justice, you know. And also, you know, this may sound a little bit weird, but I think that's what we should strive to do towards an Africa-wide M&E framework. We should strive to have something we can call an Africa-wide monitoring and evaluation framework, you know. So we have the continental vision already. So this can be coupled with unified planning, unified financing, implementation and reporting frameworks, all taking into account gender fundamentals. So we know that we do budget analysis, but do they reflect a gender lens? So all those are some of the issues that we can want to really make considerations. I want to also add that reforms will be needed to enhance a culture of results across Africa and even beyond. We need to have policy reforms. We need to have legal reforms. We need to have education reforms. For example, here in Zambia, in 2019, the government, for the first time, launched the National Planning and Budgeting, National Monitoring and Evaluation Policy, which tries to spell out what needs to be done in terms of monitoring and evaluation. And the gender lens becomes very crucial to really have or to entrench. I want to also say that transforming national statistical functions, we all know that monitoring and evaluation thrives on statistics. Some tools which statistics offices or agencies have across Africa you find that the questionnaires they have to do censuses, to do surveys, may have to be revised so that they are gender responsive in terms of the information that they collect. And that way, and over time, we should be able to get what we need to get. And in conclusion, I just want to say that we need to make sure that gender mainstreaming in monitoring and evaluation is entrenched into the project life cycle. At every stage, we need to make sure that whatever results we want to see, those results, whether they're output level, at outcome level, impact level, we need to make sure that they have got a gender face, and not just on paper, but in practice. So I want to think that while there are some gaps in terms of efforts to mainstream gender in M&E processes in Africa at the moment, I want to think that there are also some efforts, good efforts by countries, by organizations to ensure that we are able to get there as a continent and as individual countries. So I think this issue of suggestions on how best you think as participants or our audience is basically to leave it, I think, at the end of the session. I think there'll be an opportunity to ask questions or something like that. So may I say that thanks so much. I can end here, and thanks for your listening, and also maybe for your thoughts to appreciate afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc, with such a great presentation, moving away from the discourse and application. It's quite informative in realizing that we have to shift from just various discourse and applying situations that are tangible. And without further ado, I am introducing Dr. Sonal to join us and giving us a global perspective on RENARS and also contextualizing where possible. Over to you, Doctor. And please note that I'm noting all the questions from Matoti, from Mark Abrams, from Hello. We will engage with all of those and have a deep dive around about 1500 South African time. Thank you so much, Dr. Sonal, to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of the INDABA. And I cannot tell you what a pleasure it is. I'm so happy to see my dear friend Florence over here as well. And congratulations to the CLEAR team for putting together such a wonderful program on some of the most critical issues of the day. And I'm very happy to present on behalf of EVALGender Plus as the co-chair. And as a gender activist, this is something that I like to do. And it's my pleasure to talk to you about some of the work that we are doing currently. I'm going to try and share my slide. So please do tell me if you can see that. Is this okay?
Just needs it to be in a different slideshow. So it's on a presenters now.
Okay, so what is this okay?
It's great. Thank you, Doctor.
All right, hang on. Let me just, we had a few poll questions, so I'm just wondering, are the poll questions ready?
Unfortunately, our technical team had a bit of challenges with recreating them because they're supposed, it was going to log out the whole session if we did that. Apologies for that, Dr. Sonal.
Okay, there's no problem with that. We can continue with this slideshow. I'm having a bit of difficulty managing this because I'm having two slideshows here right now in front of me. Do you see the whole screen right now?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay, great. I just wanted to say that, we've had a sort of an overview of what gender mainstreaming is. And we've also, had a few examples of, at what levels can you have gender mainstreaming and what that means to us. So what I'm going to be talking to you about is that although we know that, gender mainstreaming is a cornerstone to development. And I have read the chats that what do we mean by mainstreaming? Should it be something that we should encourage, or is it that we are perpetuating a certain oppressive way of looking at it? The way I interpret gender mainstreaming and the way I use it in my work is the fact that we ensure that we incorporate gender in everything that we do. And how do you want to define gender, I think, is contextual, and it depends upon your country, what are the priorities of the country. But what it means is that you consider gender not something as an add-on, something that's incidental, but something that is intentional, and you include it in whatever we do. So, for example, if we are looking at the SDGs, there are 17 SDGs, but we have one that is specifically for gender, that's SDG number 5. But if I'm looking at gender mainstreaming, I would consider whether gender has been included in all of the 17 SDGs. And it may surprise you to know that when we did an analysis of, to what extent was gender included in the SDGs, we found that out of the 17, only 7 were gender responsive. So this is how we interpret when we are talking about gender responsiveness. I think as some of the data that has come out, indicates to us that, we are at a point where gender equality is considered both as an enabler as well as an accelerator for the Sustainable Development Goals. And we are far behind, and we are most likely not to reach that. So there are certain challenges that we need to address when we are addressing the SDGs. So I just wanted to introduce a little bit about EVALGender Plus. It's a global partnership to promote the demand, supply, and the use of gender responsive evaluation. And I do hope that many of you are already involved with it. We have a community of practice called gendereval.ning.com, and it's listed over here on the slide. It's a 4,000 strong community, and we have lots of exchanges, and it's a very interesting platform for us to share our knowledge and to share experiences and concerns. You would also find some information on EVALGender at evalpartners.org, and EVALPartners is our umbrella network, which includes other networks as well. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter as well as on Facebook. And EVALGender Plus was initiated because we wanted to address gender equality and social equity, because we feel it's fundamental to realize human rights. And so the goal of EVALGender Plus is to ensure that we incorporate this gender lens to all the SDGs that we have, and to promote the gender and equity lens. And we do that in a number of ways, and you'll find more on the website through advocacy, communication, the production of knowledge and tools, and the VNR analysis that I'm going to present today is an example of the knowledge and tools that we've developed. We also provide seed funding for gender evaluation, and we have these small grants which are absolutely amazing. And we're also working on the competencies for evaluators in gender responsive evaluations. And on the other side, you will see all the different networks with which we work with. Am I able to move the slide? Okay, let me see. There we go. So what are voluntary national reviews? So it's part of the follow-up of the agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals. And since we started in 2015, this is what UN member states are encouraged to conduct country-led country reviews on all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And you find all the reviews over there. But what we wanted to do is that, almost about 142 countries since 2015 have actually developed these VNRs. But we wanted to go a bit further and analyze it from the gender responsive perspective. So we started analyzing in 2018. We've also done for 2019, for 20 and 21. And I'll explain how we went about doing that. So when we started in 2018, we developed a briefing in which we said that the evidence from the VNRs that we studied, around 40 plus, it was a blind spot. There was almost no inclusion of gender responsive evaluative evidence. And we've heard Florence say that there's a lot of monitoring, but very little evaluative evidence. And when we looked at, what was mentioned, there was some mention of CEDAW and so on, but it wasn't strong enough in terms of the gender equality plans and strategies. And what we found is that particularly for equity-focused and gender-responsive evidence, we find it's so absent that it's very difficult to understand how policymakers are actually using that for the work that they do. There was a lack of disaggregated data, which is very critical by sex, and therefore, it becomes a challenge to monitor progress in most countries. And we also found that the role of WOPEs and women's groups in monitoring the SDGs and preparing them was also extremely weak. So very little contribution by civil society. So this is just an example of, the VNR samples that we looked at in 2018 and 19, 43 in 2018, and in 2019 it was 24 of them. And you can see that it's across all the regions of the world. What I'm going to be talking today is about the 2020 and the 2021. It was a combined sample that we took in order to understand. And then what we did is we compared it with 2018 and 19 to see, has there been any progress? Because as Florence said, what have we achieved? Is there any change that's happening? And if so, what is it? So we were really curious, and coming out of COVID, we wanted to have also an understanding sort of pre-COVID, post-COVID, what the situation was like. And for our friends here, I could just mention the countries that are mentioned below that were part of the study from the African continent. We had certain criteria, as I mentioned, when we selected these, and they were related to whether we had used them for the review for 2018 and 19. We wanted the geographical distribution across the various continents and so on. And so we had a few criteria for which we selected these studies. So they have, in total, we looked at 15 VNRs from the year 2020, 19 from the year 2021, and then we compared them with the 2018 and 19. What was the analytical framework? So one of it was very simple. We looked at all the keywords in where evaluation and gender had been mentioned, and that means in different forms, right? So gender equality, equity, gender responsive, so on and so forth. And then we also looked at what was the governance system to measure the progress of the SDGs. And when I say that, I said that, who's in charge of that? Where does it sit? We learned about it could be within the statistics department, it could be elsewhere, but we felt that understanding that also gives us an idea of what is the value that's provided for gender responsive and equity related evaluations. We also looked at what were some of the methods that were being used, what was the methodological framework. At the simplest, was there sex disaggregated data and so on. And also wanted to know whether there was evaluation that had been embedded. Was it used? What were the reviews, and how was the follow-up done? And was anything incorporated into the policies, the framework, strategies, and so on? Very, very particular. We wanted to understand that whether the marginalized voices had been included. And here we looked at gender not just as binary, but also looked at the intersectionality that is very much part of our understanding of gender. And then, of course, what are the future plans for the SDG progress and so on. So you may find this slide very interesting. When we started looking at the data, we found this absolutely fascinating. So what has changed? Definitely, there's an increased focus on gender-related policies at the national level, improved consultations with women-related machineries as women's groups, civil society groups, and so on. And the national monitoring systems and frameworks are strengthened to monitor the SDGs. And definitely there is better gender responsive evaluative evidence, but it's on national statistics and not on evaluation. And what has remained the same? Well, what we found is that there were high-level governing bodies, and I'll mention a few as I move into the next slide, in place to oversee the SDGs and the VNR. So that's a very good step. But we also found that monitoring, again, is used more than evaluation. So more of counting rather than what are we going to do with it, what's working, what's not working. And VOPEs are still not part of preparing the VNRs. So it continues to be very central focused, government focused. Sex desegregated data continues to be a challenge. And we found that the sex desegregated data was mostly for SDG 5, whereas we expected that we would find gendered data across all the SDGs. This is not working. Okay, let's see. This works. Great. So what were our conclusions? So we found that there were strong national high-level governance bodies, as I mentioned, to monitor the SDGs and so on. So that was really very good. So for example, the Prime Minister's office or the government office in Sierra Leone, Namibia, Zimbabwe were very much involved, the Ministry of Finance in Cabo Verde. So we find a strong emergence of high-level governance bodies. Again, evaluative evidence exists in some cases, but it's not yet used as a tool to inform progress. One of the, at the global level, Finland has been extremely, at the vanguard in using evaluations and for, all the goals and especially for gender as well. But we find that it's not so much at here. Sierra Leone, for example, has used evaluation for its goal 4 on education and also for goal 16 on justice. And we do find some evidence of gendered analysis in that. Going forward, country-led evaluations almost did not exist in the VNRs. And that's really a shame because there's so much of information that one can get if we conduct those, rather than just a review, which is a compilation of various statistics and so on. Which is what we find, that although there is increased attention for providing evidence through the statistics and through some research and so on, and there is some increased attention for national plans, policies, and frameworks that do that. We found quite interesting that, for example, Sierra Leone looked at the enforcement of the Hands Off Our Girls initiative that was championed by the First Lady. So sometimes that, higher level, at that level, it catalyzes a number of gender responsive, initiatives and research. And Namibia also has developed the national gender policy, and that's been a very great step. And in engagement of the women missionaries, I must mention that Kenya really stands out in the involvement of the VOPEs and inclusion of the civil society and partnering with the government in order to be able to support the SDGs. And I think that's worthy of mention. So although engagement of VOPEs is almost absent, there was a very bright spot, and it's become a spotlight, Kenya's contribution to the SDGs. So what are our recommendations? There are numerous stakeholders, such as we have civil society, we have women's missionaries. So we need a clear description of how can each of these stakeholders be involved in the consultative process, instead of just saying that they need to be involved. So I think as a very simple, practical step, this is what we recommend. We also need to strengthen the role of VOPEs to say that, they have a very important role to play in the implementation of the SDGs and the preparation of the VNRs. Definitely to increase more expertise and to promote resources, particularly for country-led evaluations, which we find still lacking. And we feel that unless we promote the use of gender-responsive evaluative evidence, we're not going to get many takers for that. And so we require, guidance and support. Either we're talking to the National Statistics Department, to able to at least address the sex desegregated data. I mean, it's 10 years beyond we've started and we are still asking the same questions. Why don't we have sex desegregated data? It's really quite shameful, I would say. And we are here talking only about binary and not even talking about intersectionality. So as I conclude, I'd like you to think about some of these questions that are up here. What, in your experience, could we strengthen in the VNR's preparation process? And what could we do as a network to improve this process? You know, how do we advocate? What do we need to do in terms of capacity building? And overall, how do we strengthen the role of VOPEs and the use of evaluations? As we know that there are so many lacunae mentioned by my esteemed panelists before me as well. So how do we strengthen the use of evaluations and say that, you know, there is a role that we, you know, play in ensuring that we promote both equity-focused and gender-responsive evaluation. And it's critical for our human rights and as we go forward. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to take any comments and any questions. What I will also do is, as soon as I end this slideshow, in the chat box, I will provide you the link to the document, and there's very, very rich information, and I certainly hope you have a chance to go through that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zaveri. Now I think we'll just shift to the Q&A session so that we address all the questions that are here. And I think it's open to all the panelists to respond to them. I think I'll start from the bottom up for now, just because it's the one that links to you, Dr. Zaveri. It says, do you have a comment on how to strengthen role of VOPEs in SDGs, and who would play this role and how they will pay for it?
Well, that's a very interesting question. So I'll take the first one. You know, how do we strengthen the role of the VOPEs? So I think having these examples, like for example of Kenya, and how much difference that has made when VOPEs are involved. We are able to get different voices in, and you know, having a report that truly reflects about gender justice and social equity. And then, you know, how to take it forward. So I think examples like this are really important in whichever context or continent that you live in. And these become our champions in a way. And I think the strengthening of the role of VOPEs is all of ours responsibility. It's responsibility of the networks, of our advocacy role that we play, you know, encouraging this discussion on how important VOPEs are, and getting the ear of the decision makers at the national level. And I think there are ways and means to do it in different forums and so on. I know it is a difficult process, but again, as I said, even one shining example lights the way. Who should pay for it? Well, this is interesting because by nature, VOPEs are voluntary in nature. So, you know, we're supposed to kind of provide our, you know, support as and when is required. So in that, it's a bit of a conundrum, but I do agree with you that, you know, when we are doing intensive work, it does make a difference if some of the time is recognized, because it's also a value that's given to, you know, what we contribute and we bring to the table. So that's a question that I really don't know how to answer about the payment.
Thank you so much, Doc. And I think the second question is from Anila, who wants to know, and this is open to all the panelists. It says, sorry, I'm still trying to read. When it comes to gender mainstreaming in practice or in organizations or government departments, do you start at managerial level or rather involve a broader staff? And this is from Anila.
Okay,
Dr.
let
Etta?
me try to hack that, and of course the other panelists can join in. Thank you very much for this question, Aniela. a very good question to start off with, to say, yes, indeed, it is important, as I show in the presentation I shared, that integration or trying to mainstream gender equality practice is at 3 levels. At the institutional level, which we call the meso level, what you may need to do, and part of the issue here is the fact that before you do anything to involve the entire organization or even government department, there has to be some kind of policy commitment or management commitment to it. And it's often useful if managers or at the managerial level, there is some kind of plan that is institutional wide, that takes in all the different bits of the organization. That's why a government needs a policy for evaluation, for example, national policies for evaluation. Otherwise, we would be treating these little bits of actions as ad hoc and person-related. So it's individual-led or activity-led. And at the end of the day, there is no institutional or departmental ownership of what is happening. And from one person to the next, you're well aware, for example, like governments, people are transferred from department to department, from unit to unit. So if the key person gets transferred and he or she was the leader of this action, it will just disappear or dissipate, it vaporizes. So it's best when the institution or department has a policy that is sitting there, and if somebody goes, it's there in the institution, and somebody departs, somebody else comes and manage. So the point is, have a document, and in that document, you show where you want to start, or you get agreement of the institution and key players, significant players, about motion based on a collective policy document or statement. I'm not sure if my colleagues want to add to that.
I thoroughly agree, Dr. Vincent, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to add, of course, in agreement, Dr. Etta, that where you really start is a very big challenge. But I think also that we need to have an octopus approach, where because the issue of gender, they're everywhere. And I want to think that it has got both the supply side and the demand side. And if we are going to succeed to have gender mainstreaming in the manner that we want it, I think we need to strengthen both the supply side, as Doc has mentioned, but the demand side has to be also excited. I think we need a robust advocacy approach where those who need to see gender equality are also aware that this is a possibility. So I just wanted to add to Doc's response that while it is important to also approach it institutionally, but we also need to have the general advocacy approach, which can make sure that the entire population actually knows what is going on in terms of who should contribute to the development agenda of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think Dr. Chirao agrees with you, because he says there's a need for a strong enabling environment to establish, perhaps across all governments that are in Africa and elsewhere, in medium-term plans, as Dr. Vincent has stated, for example, gender responsiveness financing strategies. So I think the people on the panel are in agreement with all of what has been narrated here. I think I have a whole lot, sorry, I just saw you, Dr. Sonal. You're still muted. Do you mind unmuting yourself?
I am not muted.
Couldn't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Now we can. I couldn't hear you. It's probably my connection. You can go ahead.
Can others hear me?
Now I can.
Now you can. Okay, great. I just wanted to mention that, everybody talks about gender inequity, and everybody says that it's important. But I often find that people's, kind of mystified by that. And they wonder, how am I going to do it? and they feel it's extremely difficult. They don't understand how to go about it. And so often people kind of, are a bit wary about it. So one of the things that I feel is very important and we really need to stress more on is capacity building, sensitizing and capacity building, and providing them methods and tools also on how to go about doing it, holding their hands while they do that. And again, with advocating, of course, the value of what it is. But I often find that it's kind of a block, realizing the need for it, but not knowing exactly how to do it.
Thanks, Dr. Sonal. And I think Dr. Candace Markle also says, why is mainstreaming such a challenge, not only in M&E, but also in programming? To what extent is capacity not working, not knowing how to, part of the challenge? So I think Dr. Markle echoes what you're saying. So we know it's a concern, but we don't know how do we operationalize it? How do we make sure that we make the difference and we are conscious of what we are operationalizing? And I think I'm still trying to get other questions. So Mark Abrams says, thank you for the excellent presentation. Can I be provocative and ask why mainstreaming? It accords to such power to the powers at be. We should create alternative stream that is informed, imbued by different culture and spirit. Just checking. Is there any response to that? Why gender mainstreaming? Dr. Etta, and then we'll follow with you, Dr. Sonal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions, Drs. Mokel and Abrams, and Lebo for acknowledging me. Let me say that in harking back to gender mainstreaming, what we're doing here, and I'm speaking on behalf of CLEAR, and I understand, I think I understand that I don't have that responsibility, but I'm thinking that when we are coming from, it's like going back to our history to understand where we're coming from to move to the future. So when we're looking at gender mainstreaming, for me, my understanding is that we're looking a bit like looking at that place in the journey when we basically all agree that we would start from here. Generally speaking, it's as if it is when you're building a house, the foundation, that's my understanding of saying, this is our takeoff point. Collective general agreement globally is our takeoff point. However, it's like any journey. We can take different routes, like we have said. We can decide to split up in 200 different groups of 2, groups of 4, group of 5, and each of those groups decide, okay, I'll take the journey one day at a time or half a day at a time. I will take this on my journey as a tool to help me. I'll take a spear, I'll take a hammer, I'll take this and that. So the understanding is, yes, we hacked back to gender mainstreaming, but coming to the future, we are now with a different framework, the SDGs, the 2030 agenda, the 2063 agenda, the national strategies. Some are 2030, some are 2035 now. Going into all of these spaces, all of these things make this journey complex. And that is why, like I said, it is not an easy situation. So I think we have assumed that it's okay to just take this notion and start working without stopping from time to time to say, hey guys, what are we trying to do? It's like we need an analytical framework. And that is why studies like the VNRs, or looking at the VNRs when you're not the one doing the VNRs, is useful. We're reflecting on what do we have. And so the whole idea here is that you must locate yourself where your best foot or your best expertise is going to be most effective. It is generally the case that if you are not fitting your foot to the shoe properly, it will hurt or you won't be able to walk. So it is absolutely critical to say, at what space am I operating at? For instance, the Africa Gender and Development Evaluators Network, it has operated since 2002 at the level of the project to, in a sense, empower people understanding how to do this. And we have tools and indicators and stuff like that to empower. We know the small level where we're operating on, but CLEAR is operating at a different level, and national strategies are at a different level. So we must understand how we integrate across vertically and horizontally so that we can come together, work together. But if we don't understand this and we're busy fighting one another and fighting turf wars, then we cannot be effective, especially because we know that the battle for gender equality is very, very difficult to win. It's a formidable foe. And as we're going historically forward, gender itself, the conception of gender itself has gone beyond the binary notions that we on the continent hold so dear. So the world is moving ahead. History is moving ahead of us, and we got to move very fast with it. And capacity is at the heart of this work. Yeah. And the how to, I am amazed that every time we talk about gender equality in M&E, everybody talks about the how. And part of the problem is our overall swallowing up, and basically our minds have been captured by the OECD DAC criteria that are notoriously gender insensitive. Thank you very much. I don't know if I answered your question, but
thank you so much, Dr.
I hand over to my colleague.
Thank you so much, Florence, for providing such an excellent overview of what are the problems and the obstacles and barriers that we have in gender mainstreaming. I just wanted to mention there was an earlier question on how do we operationalize it. So along with the capacity and the advocacy, one of the very concrete steps that we have found useful is to have this internal-external connection. So having somebody embedded within a department or an institution that has some gender knowledge and is able to provide that very hands-on support is sort of like a fast track to gender mainstream. And we found this extremely useful. Of course, this does mean that we need to have a very good supply of gender specialists who are able to do that, which, as we all know, is also in short supply. I just also wanted to be a bit provocative and say that, when we talk of gender mainstreaming, we are merely stating that gender should be part of everything that we do at whatever level we talk about. But it doesn't tell us what about gender should be addressed. And so I want to leave this, this comment and these ideas with you. I see a number of comments stating that, should we follow the, the usual gender mainstreaming? What about, the oppressive sort of narratives that are being played? Should we accept that, and so on? So I just wanted to mention that gender mainstream is merely stating that please address and look at gender, and gender in all its intersectionality. But what it doesn't tell us is, what are we going to do in addressing gender? And I'd like to state upfront that we need to move from gender sensitive, which is basically just the disaggregation of data, to being gender responsive, and then to being gender transformative. So if we want to transform our societies and to have greater social equity, to be able to deal with oppressive structures, with patriarchy and these hierarchies, we need to, within gender mainstreaming, also talk about how can gender be transformative in the policies, in our legislature, in our projects, in our programs, in the way we build our capacities, and so on. So I think we really need to make that jump, because if we don't think of it in that way, we are never going to reach gender equality. We will just be looking at our numbers, how many women, how many men, beyond the binaries, and how are we addressing that? But we are not going to transform our societies. So within gender, as we mainstream it at the different levels, from the project to the national levels to the global levels, we also need to have an agenda of transformation, attached to our mainstreaming that we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonal. Dr. Vincent, we'll go to you, and then we'll have the last wrap-ups from all the panelists. Thank you. And I apologize for not being able to get to all the questions. It was a very invigorating and a very jovial process, because as much as we're speaking about gender and the gaps that are within, and the things that we need to start removing our blind sides to, especially when it comes to addressing issues of gender. Clearly, we are moving from just discourse and application, but for us to do that, it needs to be a consolidated process. So I can see, and Candace is also commenting about the DEC criteria, that, you know, it's a very good point speaking about that and how it actually channels us to think in a certain way. Dr. Vincent, over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. I think Dr. Sono provoked my imagination as well, you know, when she was trying to, how do you, I think there's also a question in the chat box that, yes, we can talk about gender mainstreaming, but what really do you mean? But I wanted to think that we should be able to talk about the structure of our society. We want development in the mining sector. We want development in the agriculture sector. We want development in the education sector. We want development in tourism. And who is delivering that development? And who is making decisions so that the mining sector produces, you know, high volumes of minerals for us to be able to have foreign income? So I think whenever we are talking about these issues of gender mainstreaming, we are not far-fetched from our day-to-day economic and social lives. That is where we want to see indicators in the mining sector showing us that the contribution to the growth of the mining sector is not segregatively being, you know, pursued by the male folks, but that the female folks are also having an upper hand in making sure that the mining sector produces high GDP contribution, you know. So I want to think that no matter what, if it's in agriculture, if it is in tourism, we are talking about, you know, transforming those sectors with equal participation of man and woman without really undermining anyone. We want to blossom all of us so that we're able to drive the agenda home. And those indicators we want to see, they should be able to give us this evidence. If there is some discrimination, we put policies, we put strategies to make sure that there's fairness in what we do. I thought I should just add. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vincent. As you were speaking, I started thinking about this quote that says, until the lion tells its story, we'll always get it from the perspective of the hunter. So I do believe that it's imperative that these issues are pushed by gender-sensitive people and people that really want to redress what is happening when it comes to gender issues. Thank you so much for such an interactive and very jovial process. So I just need a wrap up from 30 seconds from you, Dr. Sonal, and then we'll start with Dr. Etta, and followed by Dr. Sonal, and lastly, Dr. Vincent. Thank you so much.
Would you like me to go first? Okay, great. So I just wanted to, remind everyone that of the 17 SDGs, only 7 are gender responsive, which means that we have a long way to go to mainstream gender in all the various SDGs. Having said that, I also want to say that each one of us can contribute towards gender and social equity. It's a human right. Whether we are working in projects, in programs, whether we are at the policy level, wherever we are as evaluators, we do have the opportunity to advocate for including gender, being responsive about it, talking about those who are most vulnerable, marginalized, and not to leave anyone behind. So I think every one of us has a role to play. And if we want to have a peaceful, just, and a happy society, I think all of us can play our role.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Very much. I'd like to just reaffirm what Sonal is saying, that we can all, if you're in the session and you're listening to us, there's a space in this global ecosystem that we can all start working from. We all should be committed to equity and equality, gender equity and gender equality, because we're all human. We have all the same rights to life and development. So we should be committed to it. Sometimes we are blinded by our locations and our interests, but if we're here, means we want to work. My lesson, my key message is that policies do not work by themselves. Africa and African governments have excellent policies that are written up in documents and on shelves of departments and agencies. It is people who work those documents. And if we see that a document is alive, like most of our constitutions, African governments have created gender machineries since the 80s. African governments are among the 27 globally now that have national policies of evaluation. But some of those policies are gender blind or gender neutral. But we have to commit to working, and we can all do something. Join your VOPE, take a course, strengthen your understanding on your capacity for the how-to. Again, let me say that AGDEN, the Africa Gender and Development Evaluators Network, has developed tools and strategies and ways of making the how-to very practical. Send an email if you want us to help out. We are a special interest group of the African Evaluation Association. And I thank you all for this opportunity to share what we have with you. And going to the future, we're here. Just give me a call and I'm there. Thank you very much, Clear Anglophone Africa. And congratulations again on this INDABA.
Thank you so much, Dr. Etta. Now, Dr. Vincent.
Thank you so much, Lebo. You have put me last. Of course, it's not a gender mainstreaming issue, right? But yeah, so thanks to my two colleagues. I think they have articulated issues very well. I think for me, really, if we are not going to invest in measurement of development processes, we will not know whether gender mainstreaming is happening or not. So it is just important that countries, organizations, you know, the African continent and even beyond, we should be able to invest in results-based management frameworks so that it's easier for us to know what is going, you know, well and what is not going well, and then we should be able to correct. Otherwise, in the absence of measurement frameworks, really, it's not, we will just be rewarding failure, you know, and maybe punishing success. So I want to just challenge all of ourselves that we need to mainstream gender in monitoring and evaluation processes so that we should be able to get the evidence that is going to make us have, you know, informed decisions. So to thank everyone really for this opportunity. This Africa Evaluation INDABA is just a good platform for us to communicate and share ideas on how best we can improve our lives. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. Now I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, Andiswa, for the closer. Please join us tomorrow for the third session. In the morning and afternoon, register, and let's carry on these engaging processes and engage on just moving away from policies and actionalizing what we need to do. Because like all the panelists have said, it's our responsibility to start actionalizing and moving away from just good policies. Let's implement it. Let's have like clear implementation process and actionalizing what is on paper. Thank you so much. Over to you, Andiswa.
Thank you so much, Lebu. On behalf of Clear AA, I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists for such an amazing, meaningful and thoughtful presentation. Our participants from all over the world. I see from the chats we had guests from Brazil, the UK, Eswatini, Cape Town, just to name a few. Thank you so much for joining us. And we hope you found this session as informative as I did. Like my colleague Lebu said, this INDABA webinar series will be going on until the 24th. We do look forward to having such more conversations, and please do join and participate with these conversations. Thank you so much to everybody. Have a lovely day. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers.